Men are moved by two levers only, fear and self-interest. Napoleon Bonaparte, they tell you that people are inherently good. That deep down, everyone wants to help to connect to create a better world. This is a comforting lie, a gilded cage built to keep you docile. Human nature, stripped of its polite veneer, is a landscape of self-interest, envy, and the perpetual hunger for power. To believe otherwise is to walk blindfolded into a viper's nest, mistaking fangs for friendship. We do not traffic in such naive fantasies. Our concern is the world as it is, a theater of constant struggle where survival depends on understanding the darker currents that drive human behavior. The myth of inherent goodness serves a purpose. It disarms the virtuous, rendering them vulnerable to manipulation. The charitable impulse, the desire to trust, becomes a liability in a world where deceit is a primary weapon. Predators thrive by exploiting this innate trust, masking their intentions behind a facade of sincerity. They offer a helping hand only to tighten their grip. They promise partnership only to seize control. The truly competent individual does not deny the existence of darkness, but instead learns to navigate it, to anticipate its movements, to wield its power when necessary. This is not an endorsement of cruelty, but a recognition of reality. Consider the executive who smiles warmly while plotting your career demise, the friend who offers support while secretly envying your achievements, the politician who promises change while serving only their own ambition. These are not aberrations, but reflections of a fundamental human drive, the pursuit of advantage. This drive is not inherently evil, but it is inherently selfish. It is the engine that propels innovation, the catalyst for competition, the foundation of societal hierarchies. To ignore its influence is to misunderstand the very fabric of human interaction. The world is not divided into good people and bad people. It is divided into those who understand the game and those who are played by it. Those who subscribe to the myth of inherent goodness are destined to be pawns, manipulated and exploited by those who recognize the true nature of the game. Our purpose is to dismantle this illusion, to provide you with the tools and insights necessary to protect yourself, to advance your interests, and to ultimately master the dynamics of power. Shed the comforting lie. Embrace the stark reality. Only then can you begin to navigate the treacherous terrain of human nature with clarity and purpose. The belief in inherent goodness is a luxury that the competent cannot afford. It is a weakness that will be exploited. It is a delusion that will lead to ruin. Human nature deceives through a veil of social conditioning, a relentless pressure to conform to idealized notions of altruism and empathy. This veneer obscures the primal calculations occurring beneath the surface, the constant weighing of costs and benefits that dictates much of our behavior. Observe the charity event, the outpouring of generosity masking the subtle competition for social status, the calculated acts of philanthropy designed to cultivate a favorable image. Even acts of apparent selflessness are often underpinned by a desire for recognition, for the validation of one's moral superiority. This is not to say that genuine altruism does not exist, but it is far rarer than we are led to believe. It is often intertwined with self-interest, a complex interplay of motivations that defy simple categorization. The individual who dedicates their life to serving others may derive a profound sense of purpose and fulfillment, a reward in itself that shapes their actions. To truly understand human nature, one must dissect these complexities, to see beyond the surface narratives, and to discern the underlying motivations that drive behavior. Deception is not merely an act of conscious manipulation, but a deeply ingrained survival mechanism. Consider the subtle art of self-presentation, the carefully curated persona we project to the world. We emphasize our strengths, conceal our weaknesses, and tailor our behavior to elicit specific responses. This is not necessarily malicious, but it is inherently deceptive. We are all actors on a stage playing roles that serve our interests. The ability to read these cues, to discern the truth behind the facade, is a critical skill in navigating the social landscape. Learn to observe inconsistencies in behavior, the subtle tells that betray underlying emotions or intentions. Pay attention to body language, to microexpressions, to the unspoken signals that reveal what words attempt to conceal. The eyes, as the saying goes, are the windows to the soul, but only if you know how to interpret their gaze. Furthermore, self-deception plays a critical role in our ability to function. We construct narratives about ourselves and the world around us that reinforce our beliefs and protect our egos. We filter information that contradicts our worldview, seeking out validation and confirmation. This cognitive bias, while often detrimental, serves to maintain a sense of stability and control. Confronting the harsh realities of human nature can be deeply unsettling, challenging our fundamental assumptions about ourselves and others. Self-deception provides a buffer, a shield against the psychological pain of acknowledging the darker aspects of our nature. However, this comes at a cost. The more we deceive ourselves, the more vulnerable we become to manipulation. We become blind to the true motives of others, susceptible to flattery and empty promises. To overcome this vulnerability, we must cultivate a ruthless self-awareness, a willingness to confront our own biases and insecurities. The competent operator understands the power of manufactured consent. Opinions and beliefs are shaped not through logical argument, but through strategic manipulation of emotions and narratives. The media, the political system, even our personal relationships are all arenas in which these forces are at play. Be wary of appeals to emotion, of narratives that simplify complex issues into simplistic good versus evil dichotomies. Seek out dissenting voices, challenge your own assumptions, and cultivate a healthy skepticism towards all forms of authority. The ability to think critically, to analyze information objectively, is the ultimate defense against manipulation. Do not allow yourself to be swayed by the prevailing currents of opinion. Forge your own path, based on reason and evidence, not on emotion and ideology. Finally, understand that human nature is not static, but a dynamic interplay of innate predispositions and environmental influences. We are not simply puppets of our genes or victims of our circumstances. We possess the capacity for reason, for self-reflection, and for conscious choice. While the underlying drives of self-interest and survival may be ever present, we have the power to shape how these drives manifest in our behavior. By understanding the forces that influence our actions, we can learn to master them, to channel our energies towards productive and meaningful ends. The recognition of human nature's deceptive tendencies is not an invitation to cynicism or nihilism, but a call to vigilance, to self-awareness, and to the pursuit of mastery. It is a call to understand the game, to learn the rules, and to play it with skill and purpose. Consider the rise and fall of empires, not as grand sweeps of history, but as the accumulated choices of individuals, each driven by ambition, fear, and the ever-present desire for self-preservation. Observe the court of Louis XIV, a gilded cage of elaborate rituals and unspoken rivalries, where the ability to discern true intentions behind carefully constructed facades was the key to survival. Every smile, every bow, every whispered compliment was a potential weapon, a calculated move in a perpetual game of power. Courtiers vied for the king's favor, not through honest service or genuine affection, but through displays of extravagance, strategic alliances, and the skillful manipulation of information. Rumors were currency, secrets were power, and the truth was a malleable commodity, easily bent to serve the interests of those who wielded it. The king himself, the Sun King, was the ultimate master of deception, projecting an image of divine authority and unwavering strength, while carefully orchestrating the political landscape to maintain his absolute control. He understood that appearances were paramount, that the perception of power was often more effective than power itself. He cultivated an aura of mystique, surrounding himself with rituals and symbols that reinforced his authority, and skillfully manipulating the court's social dynamics to prevent any single individual from becoming too powerful. The lesson here is clear. In environments where power is concentrated and competition is fierce, deception becomes a necessary tool for survival. Those who are unwilling to engage in such tactics are often outmaneuvered, marginalized, and ultimately consumed by the ambitions of others. This is not to advocate for dishonesty as a virtue, but rather to recognize its prevalence as a strategic imperative in certain contexts. To ignore this reality is to leave oneself vulnerable to manipulation, to be played as a pawn in a game one does not even understand. The study of history, particularly the history of courts and political intrigues, offers a rich tapestry of examples of human deception in action. By analyzing these examples, we can gain a deeper understanding of the psychological mechanisms involved, the strategies employed, and the consequences that result. We can learn to recognize the telltale signs of manipulation, the subtle shifts in language, the carefully crafted narratives, the appeals to emotion that are designed to bypass reason. We can also learn to appreciate the importance of cultivating our own powers of observation, our ability to read between the lines, to discern the true motivations of others, and to protect ourselves from being deceived. This is not a passive process, but an active and ongoing effort. It requires constant vigilance, a willingness to question assumptions, and a commitment to seeking out the truth, even when it is uncomfortable or inconvenient. It also requires a deep understanding of human nature, its strengths and weaknesses, its capacity for both good and evil. To be truly sovereign, one must be a master of observation, capable of dissecting the motivations of others and anticipating their moves. The world is a chess game. Those who fail to recognize the pieces and the rules are destined to be captured. The trap lies in believing that everyone operates according to a shared moral code, a universal standard of fairness. This is a delusion fostered by those who benefit from your compliance. The weak cling to this belief because the alternative, accepting the inherent ruthlessness of human interaction, is too terrifying to contemplate. They construct elaborate fantasies of justice and karmic retribution, hoping to shield themselves from the harsh realities of power. They wait for the system to protect them, for decency to prevail, while those with a sharper understanding of the game actively shape the system to their advantage. Their naivete becomes a weapon against them, a self-imposed blindfold that prevents them from seeing the blade until it is already drawn. They are the sheep who bleat for the shepherd, unaware that the shepherd's primary purpose is not their well-being, but their exploitation. Consider the subtle manipulations employed in everyday interactions. Flattery, feigned vulnerability, manufactured outrage. These are the tools of the manipulator, used to disarm and control. The weak are particularly susceptible to these tactics, craving validation and fearing confrontation. They prioritize being liked over being respected, approval over autonomy. They willingly sacrifice their own interests in order to maintain a facade of harmony, oblivious to the fact that this harmony is built upon their own subjugation. They confuse politeness with genuine goodwill, mistaking the calculated smiles of their enemies for genuine friendship. They fail to recognize that every interaction is a negotiation, a subtle dance of power in which one party seeks to gain an advantage over the other. The inability to discern true intent is a fatal flaw. The world is populated by individuals who are masters of deception, skilled at concealing their true motivations behind a mask of sincerity. They are adept at reading body language, identifying weaknesses, and exploiting vulnerabilities. They understand that people are driven by emotion, not reason, and they use this knowledge to manipulate their targets, bypassing their defenses and gaining access to their deepest fears and desires. The weak, lacking this understanding, are easily misled by carefully crafted narratives and emotional appeals. They are swayed by sentimentality, blinded by prejudice, and driven by irrational impulses. They are easily provoked, easily distracted, and easily controlled. The failure to anticipate consequences is another hallmark of the weak. They live in the present moment, oblivious to the long-term implications of their actions. They are impulsive and reactive, lacking the foresight and strategic thinking necessary to navigate complex situations. They fail to consider the potential ramifications of their decisions, the unintended consequences that can ripple outwards and undermine their goals. They are like chess players who only consider their next move, without thinking about the potential responses of their opponent. They are easily outmaneuvered, outwitted, and ultimately defeated. They stumble blindly into traps, oblivious to the dangers that lie ahead. Moreover, the weak are often paralyzed by fear, afraid to take risks, afraid to assert themselves, afraid to challenge the status quo. They cling to the familiar, even when it is demonstrably harmful, preferring the comfort of routine to the uncertainty of change. They are afraid to speak their minds, afraid to stand up for their beliefs, afraid to challenge authority. They prioritize security over freedom, conformity over individuality, submission over sovereignty. Their fear becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, reinforcing their weakness and making them even more vulnerable to manipulation. They become prisoners of their own limitations, unable to escape the cycle of dependency and exploitation. This inherent weakness is further exacerbated by a lack of self-awareness. The weak are often oblivious to their own flaws and vulnerabilities. They lack the capacity for introspection, the ability to objectively assess their own strengths and weaknesses. They are blind to their own biases and prejudices, unaware of the ways in which their perceptions are distorted by their own experiences and beliefs. They are unable to learn from their mistakes, repeating the same patterns of behavior again and again, trapped in a cycle of failure and frustration. They lack the self-discipline and self-control necessary to overcome their limitations and achieve their goals. They are driven by instinct and emotion, lacking the capacity for rational thought and objective analysis. The cultivation of a hardened realism, a ruthless pragmatism, is the antidote to this weakness. It requires a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, to challenge cherished beliefs, and to abandon comforting illusions. It demands a relentless pursuit of knowledge, a commitment to self-improvement, and a willingness to embrace the harsh realities of human nature. It is not about becoming cynical or nihilistic, but about developing a clear-eyed understanding of the world and one's place within it. It is about recognizing the inherent dangers of human interaction and developing the skills and strategies necessary to protect oneself from harm. This is not a call to abandon morality, but to transcend it, to understand that morality is often a tool used by the powerful to control the weak, to recognize that ethical considerations are often trumped by self-interest and the pursuit of power, to be prepared to act decisively, even when those actions may be considered morally questionable. This is not about embracing evil, but about recognizing its existence and developing the capacity to counter it. It is about becoming a master of the game, understanding the rules and the strategies, and using that knowledge to achieve one's own goals. The path to sovereignty lies not in blind faith or naive optimism, but in a ruthless assessment of reality and a relentless pursuit of power. It is a path that demands courage, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to truth. Only those who are willing to embrace this path can hope to escape the trap of weakness and achieve true freedom. The strategy for navigating a world saturated with deception begins with vigilance. Assume nothing, question everything. Develop a habit of scrutinizing the motives behind every action, every word, every gesture. Look beyond the surface and seek the hidden agenda. Consider the incentives at play. Who benefits from this narrative? Who loses? Follow the money, follow the power, and you will often find the truth lurking beneath the surface. Cultivate a healthy skepticism, but avoid falling into the trap of cynicism. Cynicism is a form of intellectual laziness, an excuse for inaction. It allows you to dismiss everything without having to actually engage with it. A true strategist is not cynical, but discerning. They are able to separate the wheat from the chaff, to identify the genuine from the fake, to extract value from even the most deceptive situations. Develop a deep understanding of human psychology. Learn to recognize the common biases, cognitive distortions, and emotional vulnerabilities that drive human behavior. Study the art of persuasion, the techniques of manipulation, and the methods of influence. Understand how people are programmed to respond to certain stimuli, how their emotions can be triggered and exploited, how their perceptions can be shaped and controlled. Read the works of those who have mastered the art of deception, from Machiavelli to Sun Tzu, from Robert Greene to Edward Bernays. Analyze their strategies, dissect their tactics, and adapt their principles to your own unique circumstances. Master the art of observation. Pay attention to the subtle cues that betray a person's true intentions. Observe their body language, their facial expressions, their tone of voice, their patterns of speech. Notice the inconsistencies between their words and their actions. Look for the micro-expressions that flash across their faces, revealing their hidden emotions. Listen to what they don't say, to the silences and the omissions that speak volumes. Become a human lie detector, capable of spotting deception from a mile away. But be careful not to let your observations cloud your judgment. Avoid jumping to conclusions or making assumptions. Gather as much information as possible before forming an opinion. Cultivate a network of reliable sources. Find people you can trust, people who are willing to tell you the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Seek out those who have access to information that you don't, those who have insights and perspectives that you lack. Build relationships based on mutual respect and reciprocity. Offer value in return for their insights. Be a good listener, a trusted confidant, and a reliable ally. But even with your closest allies, maintain a degree of skepticism. Remember that everyone has their own biases and agendas. Verify their information independently whenever possible. Learn to control your own emotions. Deception often relies on exploiting emotional vulnerabilities. If you are easily angered, easily manipulated, or easily flattered, you will be an easy target. Develop the ability to remain calm and rational in the face of provocation. Learn to detach yourself from your emotions and to view situations objectively. Practice emotional regulation techniques such as mindfulness, meditation, and cognitive restructuring. Cultivate a sense of inner peace and equanimity. The more control you have over your own emotions, the less vulnerable you will be to the manipulations of others. Become a master of disguise. Learn to blend in, to adapt to different environments, and to present yourself in a way that is most advantageous to your goals. Study the art of impression management, the techniques of self-presentation, and the strategies of social camouflage. Be a chameleon, capable of changing your colors to suit the situation, but never lose sight of your true identity. Maintain a core set of values and principles that guide your actions, even when you are playing a role. Remember that deception is a tool, not a way of life. Use it sparingly and strategically, and never allow it to compromise your integrity. Develop a reputation for honesty and integrity. This may seem counterintuitive, but it is one of the most effective strategies for avoiding suspicion. People are more likely to trust those who have a track record of being truthful. If you consistently demonstrate honesty and integrity in your dealings, you will be less likely to be suspected of deception, even when you are engaging in it. This does not mean that you should never lie, but it does mean that you should be judicious in your use of deception. Reserve it for situations where it is absolutely necessary, and always be prepared to justify your actions. Anticipate the moves of your opponents. Think several steps ahead. Consider their motivations, their resources, and their likely strategies. Play out different scenarios in your mind and develop contingency plans for each. Be prepared for the unexpected. Expect the unexpected. The more prepared you are, the less likely you will be caught off guard. Develop a strategic mindset, a way of thinking that is focused on long-term goals and the means of achieving them. Cultivate a sense of foresight, the ability to anticipate future events and to prepare for them accordingly. Use deception sparingly and strategically. Deception is a powerful tool, but it is also a dangerous one. Use it only when it is absolutely necessary, and only when the potential benefits outweigh the risks. Be aware of the ethical implications of your actions. Consider the consequences of your deception, both for yourself and for others. Never deceive for the sake of deception. Always have a clear and justifiable purpose, and always be prepared to accept the consequences of your actions. The effective use of deception requires a delicate balance of skill, judgment, and moral courage. It is not a game for the faint of heart, but for those who are willing to embrace the complexities and ambiguities of human nature. Consider the rise and fall of empires, for within their histories lies a brutal lesson about the deceptive nature of humanity. The Roman Empire, for instance, initially expanded through a combination of military might and shrewd political maneuvering. They offered alliances, citizenship, and infrastructure in exchange for loyalty. But beneath this veneer of cooperation lay a ruthless ambition for absolute control. They manipulated rivalries between tribes, fostered dependencies, and used propaganda to paint themselves as benevolent rulers, even as they systematically exploited resources and suppressed dissent. This calculated deception allowed them to conquer vast territories and build a powerful empire, but it also sowed the seeds of their eventual downfall. The conquered peoples, harboring resentment and distrust, remained a constant source of instability. Internal corruption and political intrigue further weakened the empire, creating vulnerabilities that were eventually exploited by external forces. The very foundations of their power, built on a foundation of lies and manipulation, crumbled under the weight of their own deceit. Warfare provides another stark illustration of the deceptive nature of human interaction. Throughout history, military commanders have employed deception as a key tactic to gain an advantage over their enemies. Sun Tzu, in his Art of War, emphasized the importance of misleading the enemy, creating illusions of weakness or strength, and exploiting their vulnerabilities through surprise attacks and misinformation. Consider the Trojan horse, a legendary example of deception that allowed the Greeks to infiltrate and conquer the seemingly impregnable city of Troy. Or think of the elaborate camouflage and feints used in modern warfare to conceal troop movements and confuse the enemy. Deception is not merely about lying. It is about creating a false reality that your opponent will accept as true. It involves manipulating their perceptions, exploiting their biases, and leading them into traps. However, relying solely on deception can be a dangerous game. An enemy that discovers your lies will likely respond with increased vigilance and aggression. Trust, once broken, is difficult to repair, and a reputation for deceit can make it harder to form alliances and build lasting relationships. Therefore, deception should be used strategically and judiciously as one tool among many in the pursuit of your goals. A general who relies solely on trickery will ultimately be outmaneuvered by a more resourceful and honest opponent. The consequences of unchecked deception are rarely limited to the immediate target. Consider the long-term effects of propaganda and misinformation campaigns. While they may be effective in the short term, they can erode public trust in institutions and create a climate of cynicism and distrust. When people lose faith in their leaders and their institutions, society becomes more vulnerable to manipulation and instability. This is why it is essential to exercise caution and restraint when using deception, and to consider the broader ethical implications of your actions. A lie may seem expedient in the moment, but it can have far-reaching and unintended consequences. The erosion of trust is a slow and insidious process, but it can ultimately undermine the very foundations of social order. Therefore, it is in everyone's best interest to cultivate a culture of honesty and transparency, even when it is difficult or inconvenient. The pursuit of truth may be challenging, but it is ultimately more rewarding than the fleeting gains achieved through deception. Human beings are wired for self-deception. We construct narratives that protect our egos and justify our actions, often without conscious awareness. This innate tendency makes us both vulnerable to manipulation and capable of extraordinary feats of rationalization. The mind, seeking consistency, will twist facts and memories to fit pre-existing beliefs, creating a distorted picture of reality. Consider the phenomenon of cognitive dissonance. When confronted with information that contradicts our deeply held beliefs, we experience psychological discomfort. To alleviate this discomfort, we may dismiss the information, rationalize it away, or even change our beliefs to align with the new information. However, the easiest path is often to simply deny the validity of the contradictory information, reinforcing our existing worldview. This is why it is so difficult to persuade someone to change their mind, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. Their identity is tied to their beliefs, and to abandon those beliefs would be to abandon a part of themselves. This inherent bias extends to our perception of others. We tend to attribute positive traits to those we like and negative traits to those we dislike, regardless of their actual behavior. This is known as the halo effect and the horns effect, respectively. A person who is physically attractive, for example, is often perceived as being more intelligent, competent, and trustworthy, even if there is no objective basis for these assumptions. Conversely, a person who is unattractive or unpleasant is likely to be judged more harshly, even if their actions are perfectly justifiable. These biases can have profound consequences in the workplace, in the courtroom, and in our personal relationships. They can lead to unfair hiring practices, biased judgments, and the formation of unfounded prejudices. To overcome these biases, it is essential to cultivate self-awareness and to actively challenge our own assumptions. We must learn to see people as they are, rather than as we want them to be. The art of deception relies on exploiting these inherent weaknesses in human psychology. A skilled deceiver understands that people are more likely to believe what they want to believe, and they will tailor their lies accordingly. They will appeal to our emotions, our biases, and our desire for confirmation, making it easier for us to suspend our critical faculties. Consider the techniques used by con artists. They often begin by establishing a rapport with their victims, building trust and creating a sense of connection. They will then identify the victim's desires and vulnerabilities, and they will craft a narrative that promises to fulfill those desires. The narrative may involve a get-rich-quick scheme, a romantic fantasy, or a promise of social status. Whatever the specifics, the goal is to create a scenario that is so appealing that the victim is willing to overlook any red flags. The most effective cons are those that play on our deepest fears and aspirations. Moreover, the deceiver understands the power of suggestion and subtle cues. They know that nonverbal communication can be just as important as verbal communication. A sincere look, a warm smile, a confident tone of voice, these can all be used to create an impression of trustworthiness, even when the words being spoken are false. Skilled liars are adept at controlling their body language and masking their emotions, making it difficult to detect their deception. They may also use techniques such as mirroring, where they subtly mimic the body language of their target, creating a sense of rapport and connection. This unconscious mimicry makes the target feel more comfortable and trusting, making them more susceptible to manipulation. The deceiver understands that trust is a powerful tool, and they will use it to their advantage. Furthermore, the deceiver will often use a technique known as gaslighting, which involves manipulating someone into questioning their own sanity. This can involve denying their experiences, distorting their memories, or making them feel as though they are losing touch with reality. Gaslighting is a particularly insidious form of manipulation, as it can have a devastating impact on the victim's self-esteem and mental health. They may begin to doubt their own judgment, to question their own perceptions, and to lose their sense of self. This makes them even more vulnerable to manipulation and control. The deceiver thrives on the victim's confusion and insecurity, using it to further their own agenda. To protect oneself from deception, it is essential to cultivate a healthy skepticism and to question everything. Do not take anything at face value, and always be wary of those who seem too good to be true. Pay attention to the inconsistencies in people's stories, and trust your gut instinct when something feels off. Remember that even the most charismatic and convincing individuals are capable of deception. It is also important to cultivate self-awareness and to understand your own vulnerabilities. What are your deepest desires? What are your biggest fears? What are the things that you are most likely to believe? By understanding your own weaknesses, you can better protect yourself from those who would exploit them. The most effective defense against deception is knowledge and awareness. Finally, consider the societal implications of widespread deception. A society built on lies and mistrust is a fragile society. When people lose faith in their institutions and their leaders, they become more cynical, more apathetic, and more susceptible to manipulation. This can lead to social unrest, political instability, and even violence. It is therefore essential to cultivate a culture of honesty and transparency, even when it is difficult or inconvenient. This requires holding leaders accountable for their actions, promoting critical thinking and media literacy, and fostering a sense of civic responsibility. A healthy society is one where truth is valued and deception is exposed. The pursuit of truth is a constant struggle, but it is a struggle worth fighting for. The future of our society depends on it. Consider the case of Elizabeth Holmes and the Ranos. Here was a young, charismatic Stanford dropout who promised to revolutionize blood testing. Her company, the Ranos, claimed to have developed technology that could perform hundreds of tests with just a single drop of blood. This was a seductive proposition, promising to make healthcare more accessible and affordable. Holmes cultivated an image of brilliance and innovation, dressing in Steve Jobs-esque black turtlenecks and speaking with unwavering conviction. She attracted high-profile investors and board members, including former Secretaries of State George Shultz and Henry Kissinger. The media fawned over her, portraying her as the next Silicon Valley visionary. But behind the dazzling facade lay a web of deception. The Ranos' technology simply did not work. The company was conducting most of its tests using traditional methods, and the results were often inaccurate. Holmes knew this, but she continued to promote her company's false claims, raising hundreds of millions of dollars from unsuspecting investors and endangering the health of patients. Her motivation was clear: power, wealth, and recognition. She was willing to sacrifice everything, including the well-being of others, to achieve her ambitions. The Ranos scandal is a stark reminder of the power of deception and the importance of critical thinking. Many intelligent and experienced people were fooled by Holmes, highlighting the fact that no one is immune to manipulation. Several factors contributed to her success in deceiving so many. First, she exploited people's desire to believe in a compelling story. The idea of a revolutionary healthcare technology was inherently appealing, and people were eager to embrace it. Second, she used her charisma and persuasive skills to create a powerful illusion. She projected an image of competence and confidence that masked the underlying reality of her company's failures. Third, she surrounded herself with influential figures who lent credibility to her claims. The presence of respected individuals like Schultz and Kissinger made it more difficult for people to question her narrative. Fourth, she actively suppressed dissent and punished those who raised concerns about the company's technology. This created a culture of fear and silenced internal critics. Finally, she benefited from a lack of regulatory oversight and media scrutiny. The healthcare industry is notoriously complex, and it was difficult for outsiders to understand the technical details of the Ranos' technology. The media, eager to promote a positive story, often failed to ask tough questions. Holmes used all these elements to craft a compelling deception. She presented an incomplete picture to her advantage, hiding the inconvenient truth of the product's failure. The lesson is clear: question everything, especially when it sounds too good to be true. Even seemingly credible endorsements do not guarantee reality. Verify claims independently and be wary of charismatic leaders who brook no dissent. The Ranos case also illustrates the ethical implications of deception. Holmes's actions not only harmed investors, but also endangered the health and well-being of patients. Inaccurate blood test results could have led to misdiagnosis and inappropriate treatment. This highlights the importance of honesty and integrity, especially in fields like healthcare where people's lives are at stake. Deception in any field erodes trust and undermines the foundation of a healthy society. A single lie, amplified by ambition and unchecked power, can have devastating consequences. The Theranos case serves as a valuable case study in human nature and the dynamics of deception. It demonstrates how easily people can be swayed by charisma, wishful thinking, and the allure of innovation. It also underscores the importance of critical thinking, independent verification, and ethical leadership. Only by remaining vigilant and skeptical can we protect ourselves from those who would seek to deceive us. Human nature deceives because it inherently seeks the path of least resistance, favoring comfort and confirmation over the arduous task of critical evaluation. This inclination makes individuals vulnerable to manipulation, as deceivers skillfully exploit pre-existing biases and desires. The human brain, wired for pattern recognition, readily accepts narratives that align with established beliefs, even if those narratives lack empirical support. This cognitive shortcut, while efficient in many everyday situations, becomes a significant weakness in the face of deliberate deception. Further compounding the problem is the social pressure to conform. Challenging a widely accepted narrative, even with compelling evidence, often carries the risk of social ostracism. People are naturally inclined to avoid conflict and maintain harmonious relationships, making them less likely to question authority or dominant viewpoints. Deceivers exploit this inherent need for belonging by crafting narratives that resonate with the prevailing social norms, making it easier to gain acceptance and control. The emotional component of human nature also plays a crucial role in the success of deception. Fear, greed, and hope are powerful motivators that can override rational judgment. Deceivers often target these emotions, using them to cloud people's perception and manipulate their decision-making. A skilled con artist can evoke a sense of urgency, creating a situation where individuals feel compelled to act without carefully considering the consequences. Moreover, the innate desire for a positive self-image can also make people susceptible to deception. Nobody wants to believe they are gullible or easily fooled. This reluctance to admit vulnerability can lead individuals to rationalize or ignore red flags, clinging to the belief that they are immune to manipulation. The overconfidence bias, the tendency to overestimate one's own abilities and knowledge, further exacerbates this problem. People who believe they are particularly intelligent or perceptive are often the most vulnerable to sophisticated forms of deception, as they are less likely to suspect that they are being manipulated. The pervasive influence of social media adds another layer of complexity to the landscape of deception. The ease with which information can be created and disseminated online makes it increasingly difficult to distinguish between truth and falsehood. Algorithms designed to maximize engagement often prioritize sensational or emotionally charged content, regardless of its accuracy. This creates an echo chamber effect, where individuals are constantly exposed to information that confirms their existing beliefs, reinforcing their biases, and making them even more resistant to dissenting viewpoints. Furthermore, the anonymity afforded by the internet allows deceivers to operate with impunity, spreading misinformation and manipulating public opinion without fear of reprisal. The illusion of intimacy created by social media can also be exploited to build trust and rapport, making it easier to gain access to personal information and manipulate individuals for financial or political gain. The digital age has thus created a perfect storm for deception, amplifying the inherent vulnerabilities of human nature